Welcome to Nailed It, a podcast featuring business tips from industry leaders, presented by Clever Punch. Here's your host, Jade Flogerzi.
Welcome back to Nailed It. Today's guest is Juliana Choy, founder and CEO of Priority Architectural Graphics, the San Francisco Bay Area's leading architectural signage company. Juliana launched the business in 1995 as a small nameplate company, and over the past 3 decades has transformed it into a trusted partner for general contractors, developers, and public sector clients. Priority specializes in the design, fabrication, and installation of signage for large-scale projects, always with a focus on exceptional client service and long-term relationships. Under Juliana's leadership, the company has built a reputation for quality, safety, and innovation, including a unique partnership with the local Carpenters Union to develop specialized training for sign installation. Now, beyond her role at Priority, Juliana serves as a board member for Mannix Consulting, contributing her expertise in business strategy and organizational leadership. She joins us today to share her entrepreneurial journey, her leadership philosophy, and how she's championing a physical trade. So working with materials, craftsmanship, and installation in such an increasingly digital world. So as already mentioned, Juliana, you work in a physical industrial materials trade. So I'm so excited to chat with you more about this and so happy to have you on the podcast today.
I am so happy to be here. Thank you, Jade.
Great. So I'm sure many people may have the misconception that maybe because you're a woman and you're in the design world, you must be a designer, just thinking strictly of the digital aspect of the trade. Do you find that's the case?
Yeah, it's interesting. My company, we are primarily a fabrication and installation company. So we are really literally the nuts and bolts portion of signage. But it's generally been a pretty male-dominated industry. The craft side of it, the design side, right? The design portion, the environmental design. We call a lot of our designers environmental graphic designers. But that's been generally a bit more of a balanced industry gender-wise. And so, yeah, it's interesting. Sometimes I mention to people, I have an architectural signage company, and they're like, oh, so you must design, right? So it's interesting how I hope that I'm somewhat breaking that mold a little bit by being on kind of the other side of the ledger, so to speak, between the design and the side.
And just to give a little more context about the business, you're based in San Francisco. How far does your service extend? You stay in the San Francisco Bay Area?
We generally stay in the Bay Area. We do some work in the Sacramento Valley. We're kind of kicking the tires around LA, I'll say. We're very blessed. California's an amazing economy. I think we're fourth or fifth largest in the world. So there's a lot of bread in our basket, so to speak. So very thankful about that. But we are looking to see what's available in the southern part of the state.
Nice. Yeah. And when people are out and about, what would they see that could be something that you work on?
Oh, yeah. That's the best part about my job is kind of driving around the Bay Area. And, we all point, we did that, we made that, we installed that. I'll just name a few. So if you fly out of San Francisco Airport, Terminal 1, also known as the Harvey Milk Terminal, we installed many of the signs in that terminal, fabricated and installed, helped with the project delivery. We have made signs at San Jose Airport, Oakland Airport. So aviation is a big part of our company. And as everybody knows, because almost everybody's traveled through an airport, wayfinding is incredibly important when you're in an airport because you've got to get to your destination. You've got to get to your gate when you need to get there. Beyond that, we are very fortunate to be, again, in the Bay Area where there are a lot of very iconic companies. And so literally, I feel like if you drive down the Silicon Valley corridor, you'll see some of the most iconic branding, the Intels, the eBays, the PayPals, the Yahoos, the Googles, right? So a lot of our product touches their real estate, which is, it's really thrilling, right? Because they have amazing branding and they're such impactful companies to, our entire society right now. We have dabbled in art as well. Kind of the world we live in is a nice intersection between architecture, construction, and engineering and art, right? It kind of sits at that intersection between all 4 of those disciplines. But art is a really fun kind of place that we live in. So we just manufactured and installed a very beautiful art sculpture that sits right at the gateway to the city of Napa. Right. So everybody knows Napa. So if you take a vacation up there or go wine tasting and you kind of enter into the downtown wonderful area of Napa, you'll see a really beautiful art sculpture that we built for Ana Teresa Fernandez, an artist. It's about 20 feet tall, and it's called Circulation. So all of the above, it's amazing to just drive around and see these sorts of fruits of our labor.
How neat, and such a wide variety. Yeah, I bet it is rewarding because, like was mentioned, so many things are digital now. And so it's rewarding to actually see something tangible, like get to see your work in a physical way, I'm sure. As was mentioned, the first misconception about what you do and how it must, maybe it's likely digital, but no, it's actually hands-on fabrication. Any other misconceptions around your business that you encounter?
Yeah, I'd say that, when it comes to craft, right? We're working in a craft, right? We're building, and a lot of times people focus on the craft itself, which is obviously very, very important. We pride ourselves on, top fit and finish of whatever we build and install. It's got to look perfect for our clients. That's it. No blemishes, no wonkiness, nothing askew. It's got to be perfect. That being said, what's really important is also how you deliver these projects, right, to your clients. My clients are oftentimes large general contractors that are very deadline driven, right? Because their clients are very deadline driven. They have real estate deliverables that they just need to hit. And so it's always, I say to my team, it's not just a matter of, the craft, but it's how you deliver the craft, right? How you communicate to your clients, how you make sure that they know transparently what your supply chain is looking like, what your scheduling is looking like, what your resource balance is looking like, like how busy is your staff? How busy are your installers? And all that is, I would say, just as important as the craft itself. They're so, in my opinion, very equally balanced. In order to be a really strong partner to our clients, we need to look at both sides of the coin.
Yeah, absolutely. And I imagine that when you get involved in these projects that you're dealing with such scale. Like, I can't imagine the scale involved when the project is the airport.
Yeah. That project, we started conversations in 2016. It's September of 2025, and we're just kind of closing it out right now. So it's fascinating, right? I find that part so fascinating because if you talk about airport terminals right now, and you're planning, these long, our clients are really, I tip my hat to them. They're thinking of 10 years, 15 years down the line. What are the needs for, say, an airport terminal? Are we going to have autonomous planes? Right? How autonomous are these vehicles, or the planes in the air, but also the vehicles that take you from the airport, right, to whatever your final destination is, right? How does autonomy work into that? And so I just have so much respect, right, for our clients that they have to think in these sort of really long strokes, these really broad strokes of where are we going to be? And how do the different trade partners like Signage, how do they fold into this communication? Yeah. It's really cool. And we here in California, we have very forward thinking, right, planners that are really shaping, right, the future in a smart way.
Give us a little idea of what your team is like, the size, and when someone collaborates with you, kind of who's going to be helping them through this project.
Right. So we're about 40. So we're very small. I'd say not the smallest, but we collaborate very closely together. Collaboration is absolutely one of our core values because we really try to make sure that, when we're helping problem solve for clients, we're calling in the right team members at the right time. We have folks on our team that are very technical. They have built it. They have installed it. They've hung the vinyl. They've cut, they run the CNC machine. They've kind of done everything, right? And those technical people on our staff can answer these questions like just so quickly. And the leadership team, can step back and say, okay, talk to so-and-so from our team, because they're going to tell you which sort of hanger to use, which sort of anchor to use, which sort of hardware to use. And so we just are very, very careful about making sure that team members step aside to let the experts kind of fill, right, that space. We have folks on our team that are just exceptionally good at scheduling. Right. And again, when we're looking at these, longer term, capital improvement projects, and we really need to know, okay, we've got a window to kind of strike, so to speak, to build and install. And we have this really long lead up period. Sometimes like we're 2 or 3 years in prep, and then we get 2 or 3 months to install. Right. And that's kind of crazy when you think about it. Right. And so, but there is a schedule that can be assigned to those different milestones. And, you can't leave it till the end, right? You really need to have that planned out. So we've got some excellent project schedulers on our team. We have, great estimating team. We have amazing set of installers and fabricators as well that probably collectively have, oh my God, hundreds of years of experience in doing what they do.
Nice. Yeah, it's obvious that the expertise of the team is a huge part of what contributes to your success.
Yeah.
So you started Priority Architectural Signage as a nameplate company back in 1995. What were some of the key turning points that helped you grow into one of the Bay Area's leading architectural signage firms?
Yeah, it's so funny. The nameplates I used to make, I don't know, like if folks that were around 30 years ago, you'd always see like people, you go to the bank and you'd see people wearing nameplates on their lapels. And so that's what I started the company as. We were literally just making little nameplates. But it was interesting because that was 1995. And if you kind of go back in history, 1995 was also the year that they passed the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA law. And that really changed the construction industry, the built environment, right? Because suddenly you had to have all of your space accessible to, the community that was left out prior to 1995. So that law was passed, and then it really started to shape, and the whole landscape of the construction industry shifted kind of in the direction to make sure the accommodations were there. And signage was really impacted by that because before, you had signage, okay, you kind of paint your lettering on the wall and then that's your sign, or that can be your sign. Suddenly signage had to be accessible to the visually impaired community. So the visually impaired community was largely benefited the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so suddenly signage needed to be tactile. So how you read a sign, if you're visually impaired, is you read it with your fingers. And so I learned how to make signs for the visually impaired that included tactile lettering. So the lettering would be raised, and then Braille. So those in the visually impaired community that could read Braille could read the sign. And so after I started making nameplates, I learned how to make ADA signs. There's a particular name for that type of sign. And so that really was a big milestone because a lot of people were just still painting letters. And and you 10 years later, you'd ask them, do you make ADA signs? And they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. I just paint letters, right? So, it's really interesting, right? Business owners need to constantly be understanding, how are industries shape shifting? How does legislation shape shift your industry? Right? How do, different things on the horizon can really, you just can never be asleep at the wheel if you're a business owner because things kind of land in your lap, so to speak, in your control or largely out of your control that completely change, your industry.
You obviously saw that need. So you started in 1995 and then that's so interesting. I never knew that the ADA started that year, and you're absolutely right. I can't believe how much that would have changed the construction industry. So then you start seeing this need for signage. Have you done the manufacturing part all along, or is that like a piece that you weaved into the business later on?
Yeah, when I started the company, it was me in a little 350 square foot room with literally an engraving machine and a desktop computer. So I made all the signs from the very start. It was just me at first, and then we grew organically by hiring employees. And then when going back to the ADA law, when that came out, I literally went and read the law. I read the ADA law that was passed that year and kind of began to decipher, okay, what is this new code? Then I went to the machine and I figured out how to make signs with Braille and raised lettering from the machine. So I was kind of studying the law and then manufacturing myself. It was just me. So I could R&D very quickly. It was just me. So I was kind of R&Ding. And then I learned how to make the signs. And then it was just me, as only employee. So I started wholesaling them to other sign companies. So I literally went door to door. Opened up the yellow pages, because back then that's how we communicated. We had yellow pages. I opened up the yellow pages and I found other companies that I knew probably were not doing what I was doing, geeking out over federal law. And then I went and knocked on the door of these other sign companies and said, "Hi, do you know what an ADA sign is?" And they're like, "No, we don't know what you're talking about." And I described it to them and I said, you're probably going to get asked, because this law passed. And, if you're going to be selling to a client that has a public building, they're probably going to want an ADA sign. So just come to me. And so I went to all these sign companies, generally in kind of the Northern California area, but expanded. And so I built this kind of wholesale business based on the ADA law. And then that's kind of was a milestone. And I grew my business quite a bit from there, for a number of years. I've since shed the wholesale business. It just, our economy of scale doesn't work that way anymore. Right. Mm-hmm. But, that was kind of, at the time I was kind of flexing with what the needs were. That's and so I met a ton of people. I met a ton of people that way. I was literally I would call and just kind of show up and knock on doors and they're like, "Who is this girl?" But I look back on it really fondly. It was fun. I just looked at the car and drove around.
And I love it's obvious that the curiosity element and seeing a need seeing a solution for a problem that came up, those are some of the two elements that contributed to those early turning points. Is there anything else that comes to mind where you're like, man, that quality or that whatever it was in you really contributed to the growth of your business?
Well, it's all happening to us right now, right? With AI, it's just happening, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I don't know how you look at it. It's happening in hyperspeed, right? It's happening in hyperspeed. So there's parallels though, there's kind of metaphors, the way that an ADA law changed the way the built environment was shaped, right? It's a very analog example, but it was big, really big deal. And the same thing is happening right now with AI. It's just, it's all very, it's not analog. It's very digital, of course. Like we're mentioning earlier, the digital world, the hard part again is it's moving so quickly, right? But I see really kind of similar shades of, you need to pay attention. You need to see how this is potentially going to really transform industries, transform how people approach problems, approach work, approach workload. It's tougher, right? I would say that it's tougher with AI because it's moving so fast and there's a lot of FOMO, right? There's a lot of FOMO. I see it myself. I see it all around us. Everyone kind of knows it's just a huge deal, but nobody really knows
what it is yet.
Yeah, what it is.
What we're dealing with. Yeah, what we're working with.
Yeah, with, other business transformational things that have happened in my past 30 years, it's been a lot more analog. So it's kind of easier to it's easier to project out. It's easier to do, kind of scenario planning because you can visually almost map out the scenarios, right? With AI, it's the scenarios you map out might be completely doesn't make any sense 3 months from now.
How are you, or are you implementing AI in your business yet?
Yeah, we certainly are. I mean, right now we're kind of picking little low-hanging fruit off available trees, right? Which, saves us tremendous time. I mean, Jade, we've built slide decks and we've poured. I mean, probably between you and I, we've probably built slide decks and have clocked in months of our lives building slide decks. Mm-hmm. And, I can build a slide deck now in 4.8 seconds, right? Once I narrate it, throw in some drawings. I mean, between, what Canva, Piktochart, Gamma has available. So that is just, you have to do it, right? Because my slide decks that I spent weeks poring over in my library look so stale and old now, I could never present them.
Going back to, I was just thinking about the solutions with ADA. I imagine with your commercial signage that most of it, if not all, has to be within the regulations of either city or county codes. Is that the case?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And is that something that your team is really savvy about, like a solution that you bring to the general contractors? Do they also know kind of what the requirements are with signage? Is it a collaborative effort with that?
Yeah, it has to be collaborative, but a lot of times our clients know just kind of the surface level. And, we need to choose how much to, kind of peel back the onion with them and show them like all the really detailed minutia. Cause we get down to like letter spacing between characters needs to be a certain dimension. I mean, depending on the project, we have gotten calipers out and measured spacing between, bottom of lettering and the top of the braille. I mean, literally getting calipers out. Now, do I need to involve all my clients in that? No. I mean, they don't need to get, into those sorts of weeds, but it is our job to know that stuff. And yes, we certainly have technical experts in our company that will live in those weeds because that's what we're hired to do.
Do you ever are you ever involved with projects needing to be approved or going before a board or anything like that?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, many of our projects need to go through permitting. Typically, before some sort of approval committee, that's usually handled by the AE team or the design team. So not that wouldn't be fun, but a lot of that is kind of, vetted beforehand.
Yeah. But at least you having the wherewithal of creating something that's actually going to be practical and not hold up the process and get through the permitting and get the project down the road, I'm sure is helpful.
We have a whole bench of engineers as well, right, that work closely with us, because we very often have to make sure that everything is passed through the building department.
Yeah. Just thinking about these different milestones that you've had through the business. I know you said you look back fondly on it and the early years and being in your 350 square foot studio with your engraver to where you are now. What are your thoughts about the business or the industry and what happens next? I know we mentioned a little bit with AI, but anything else on where you see the architectural signage industry heading?
Oh, it's a good question. I think going back to the whole project delivery portion of it, it's very, very important, right? The stakes of some of these projects are very, very high right now. They're just very, very high. Projects are getting bigger in terms of size, but really dollar amount as well, right? These projects are very, very expensive. They have a lot of high-tech special systems in them. There's, just really, some of these projects I see, they're really pushing the envelope in terms of what a building can be. So that being said, these projects, there's a lot at stake, right? For these projects, people are, whether it's the general contractor, the developer, the state agency, putting a lot of money on the line, to build these things. And, I think it's really important that impacts like how these projects are delivered. There needs to be so much collaboration and integration, right? Because it's crazy, but you can go back to these ADA signs, you need to have your signs up and your rooms labeled properly before you get sign off on your project. So think about, you might have $100 million project. And if your signs are late, you literally will not get TCO, which is crazy, right? But it just goes to show that, I'm not going to say even a trade, because I feel like we have a very important trade, but, when people think of the major trades, they might think of MEP, right? And it's like, you got to get, the electricity right. Of course you do, but everything needs to come together, right, to get the building open. And so it kind of goes back to our emphasis is, yes, we need to build a very good sign. It needs to look good. It needs to be really not good. It needs to look perfect. It needs to be hung perfectly. But how we deliver the project to our clients is becoming increasingly just as important. I'd say that how we communicate with these projects has changed a lot. When I started, we were still going and picking up literally blueprints, like the ammonia-based blueprints, right, in rolls. And we'd roll them out, we'd look at them, and then they moved to digital prints. And now everything is digital, right? So that means that there's just a lot of just digital information floating around, right? And you need to keep track of all this digital information, all your architectural sets, your engineer, your landscaping sets, right? And so you need to have a really good infrastructure within the company to keep track, right? Of just file management. Gone are the days of just purely relying on craft.
Yeah. And as the projects get larger and more complex, are you hungry for, the longer that you're in business, is that motivating for you? Like, yeah, we want to keep like leveling up and we want companies to trust us more and more? Or do you feel like you find that sweet spot that you want to stick to as far as complexity or project size?
No, we absolutely want to keep leveling up. I mean, some of these projects that are on deck, right, are just incredible. And, and it's fun to travel because you see when you go to other countries, you kind of see like what they're doing, right? And usually slightly different from what we're doing, but you kind of cherry pick the best of all these different things you see around the world. And there's so much just amazing capacity that we have in terms of like innovative thinking in the built environment. And it's like, oh my God, it's so exciting to think you can be a part of that somehow, even just a little bit of it, right? There's just, it's so cool to see some of these projects and what they're delivering. And we, as much as we can, we'd like to be considered to be a part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. When I reached out to you to be on this podcast, it's because when I had first chatted with you, I was one of the people that had the misconception about your business. I talked with you and got to learn. And when we talked, and I thought, okay, I'm talking to Juliana and she does graphic signage in San Francisco. That sounds neat. But then learning about the size of your business, how long you've been around, the types of projects you do, the complexity to these projects, I was like, this is so cool. Like, she is so cool. She is running a huge business and dealing with some serious responsibility with these projects. So I'm so grateful that I got to talk with you and learn more about your business, and for our listeners to hear, just a little bit behind the curtain, because you're obviously gracious and humble. And I'm just happy for more people to know how cool the work is that you do and what's going on down there at Priority Architectural Graphics. So thank you so much for joining us today and sharing a little bit more about your business. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Jade. Can I just plug our website if anyone's kind of curious about? Yeah, so
how they can find you.
Yeah, prioritygraphics.com. And on that website, you can see some of it's not all, but some of the more recent projects. We have some case studies on there. It's really fun stuff. And yeah, it's kind of a trade that you don't really, I always say, if you don't think about signage unless it's bad signage. Like if you're at the airport and it's bad signage, you're like, what is going on? Somebody has to fix this. We've all been in that position. If the signage is there and it works and you just get to where you need to go, like say, the train station or, an airport or anywhere, right? The zoo, then you're like, okay, naturally, this is how it should be. So that's how we want to kind of, we want to build great product, but we kind of want to recede into the background and let's just have good wayfinding for people's experiences. Kind of fun.
Have that like exceptional user experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Nailed It, business tips from industry leaders, brought to you by Clever Punch. Nailed It is all about connecting with people, building relationships, and helping each other. If you're interested in connecting with any of the guests on our episodes, you can find their contact info in our show notes or on the podcast page at cleverpunchco.com. You can also email info@cleverpunchco.com with any questions or feedback. I'm your host, Jade Flogerzi. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time.